I was born named Zhang Zheshu in the year 2002, November 12th, in the city of Shenzhen, China. I was born the eldest of two brothers, with my twin Harry, who I've lived with my entire life. And for the first 7 years of my life, that is how I experienced a Chinese lifestyle, growing, learning, and seeing everything that a person would see in Shenzhen. And for those years of my life, that's how I thought I was going to live for the rest of my life. Growing up, graduating high school, getting a job, making a family, and dying there, all in Shenzhen, China, as a Chinese person. But that is a life I will never know. In the year 2009, my family moved to Canada. Instead of bustling city streets, glowing skyscrapers, and weekly light drone shows, I saw the first snowfall, the endless Canadian forests, and the night sky stars. And this is the start to how I became a diaspora. It was only until recently that I realized that my diasporic identity had more of an impact on my life than I thought. I began to ask questions about what it means to be diaspora. How can my perspective be considered an alternative compared to people who were born in Canada and lived that way their entire lives? And I've come to notice a few factors that were key major influences in my life. One of the biggest factors that I realized was influenced by my diasporic identity was food. Despite living in Canada for a majority of my life, my taste buds and preferences has always been for Eastern Asian food. I've always felt that in comparison, Canadian cuisine was very lacking. And the times that I revisited China during the summer made me realize that what I was missing was not a lack of appetite, but instead a lack of choice that did not suit my preferences. Living in Canada did not give many options for Chinese cuisine, and the public reception of Eastern food was not always well received. I remember back at a friend's birthday party that they would always reject the dumplings that my mom would brought because nobody would like the smell of dumplings when you open them from a container. This put me in a dilemma where on the one hand, I would want to eat the same food as everyone else and share the same experiences as them as a part of the food sharing. But the reality is you just can't enjoy the same kind of food as others while also having your own preferences. Another major factor that had a large influence from my diasporic identity was language. Language was a massive barrier for me. Communication with my fellow peers was incredibly difficult, and it often made me the subject of bullying. Being unable to communicate properly with authority figures as well also meant that I was unable to seek out any help for my social interactions and difficulties. I was also unable to talk to my parents in fear of disappointing them. I was raised in a traditional Asian family lifestyle, meaning that expectations were high. Knowing the sacrifices that my parents made to give my brother and I a better education meant that I was in constant fear of letting them down. So I did not bring up any of the problems I had, wanting them to feel good about their decisions. And one of the other factors that contributed to this massive language barrier and the difficulty of learning it was education. During the early 2000s, the Canadian education system was not well equipped for handling second-generation immigrants. I went through a program called ESL, or English Second Language, but it happened synchronously with the other English-based classes, meaning that all the curriculum had the same expectations for you, despite only one course compensating for the fact that you were not able to perform as well due to a language barrier. And on top of this, there was also the existence of French courses. So to add on to the pressure of learning English, I also needed to keep up with learning the French language. Needless to say, I got a lot of zeros in those courses. But it wasn't because of a lack of academic abilities, but because of a literal physical barrier of verbal understanding. And the largest influence that I've had as a diasporic identity was the cultural aspects. A lot of my values and beliefs were based on Eastern Chinese traditions. This meant being more conservative and often more restrained in social settings. Many times, this meant clashing with people on values that they have inherently believed are correct. And when you're the minority living in a diasporic community, you are often taught that the beliefs you grew up with are wrong. Some notable examples of these cultural differences would include the idea of shared eating versus individual eating. In China, it is often normal for people to share a dish together. However, in places like Canada, I've learned that it is only normal to share dishes when you're in proximity with family. Concepts such as making loud eating noises to show that you're enjoying the dish comes off as impolite in Canadian society, and the use of chopsticks, a key utensil in Asian eating, does not exist either. And it is these differences that have made me become isolated from the rest of Canadian society, depending only on my family for social interactions. Both my parents were about as traditional gets. They were both born in Harbin, a part of northern China, and have lived up there all the way up to their 50s. Both my mom and dad say that they came from what they called a simpler time. The expectation was to follow the system and do your part in society. This meant satisfying every single expectations that your parents had of you and to never question them no matter what. My mom became what is known as an iron lady in Chinese society, one that is as tough as she can get and takes care of everything in the family by herself. My father had the expectations of the patriarchal family placed upon him, rarely letting himself show emotions and rarely ever giving out actual affection to the other family members. And as they reached their 50s, they realized that the life that they have grew up in is not one that they wanted for their children. Because of the trauma that they had growing up, and because of the Western American dream that was broadcasted to them, they wanted a different chance, a different opportunity for me. Opportunity was the big word that lured our family in. They had believed that all the problems they experienced during their childhood upbringing would not exist in an environment as great as Canada. But adapting and living in Canada was far more difficult than anticipated. They had no connections, no family, and no friends. They had to suffer through the language barrier, as well as the cultural and social differences between the Chinese and the Canadian. My parents suffered from the same problems I did, but they had to tolerate the discrimination in an actual societal setting rather than in a school environment. Before we immigrated, my family was living in Shenzhen, one of China's first special economic zones. Unlike many other cities at the time, Shenzhen was more market-oriented and open to foreign investment. My parents moved there initially from Harbin because their jobs gave them the opportunity to build a business in a rapidly growing environment. One of Shenzhen's most important economic factors is the fact that it is located right beside Hong Kong. Being so close to an international hub area exposed my parents to many different cultures, economies, and foreign ways of thinking. And these were the exact type of eye-opening experiences that planted the idea of immigration in their heads. But when we immigrated in 2009, Shenzhen was still in its early stages of the economic boom. It isn't exactly the global economic powerhouse that it is today. But despite this, my parents ultimately still made the choice to move to Canada, not for economic status, but for a better opportunity for their children. They believed that a stronger education mattered more than economy or any social status, and they were willing to start over in a place like Canada to give us better opportunities. And while we were in Canada, Shenzhen and China as a whole began to rapidly develop. Shenzhen today is a center of massive tech industries, including drones, electronics, and telecommunications. Many company centers are located there, such as Huawei, Tencent, and DJI. And as a result, this highly developed urbanization has brought about enormous conveniences, such as a very sophisticated delivery service system, many easy to access food options, as well as cashless payments through platforms such as WeChat. And in the blink of an eye, 15 years have passed. and we are now here in the present. So what have I taken out of my diasporic experiences in Canada? Despite all the Western perceptions of China, the headlines, the news, the stereotypes, my experiences have still shown me something different. It has taught me that I cannot erase one side of myself and forget it just because it's easier to live with the one I currently have. And ultimately, I'm very proud of where I come from, and I still want to build my life in the place where I grew up in. But now I'm facing a different kind of problem, a reverse diaspora. After living in Canada for so long, going back isn't so simple anymore. My habits, my social rules, the environment itself, I would have to readjust to adapt to all of it. And there's a strange sort of awkwardness to that. And the reason for that is because I realized that there is no wrong side in a diaspora. Both places are where I've lived, and both places have shaped who I am. Choosing one side did not mean I betrayed the other side or made the other side wrong. It just means that I need to navigate myself through where I really belong. Being a diaspora isn't just about a singular identity or a singular place. It's much more personal and much more nuanced than that. And I believe it's about understanding where the home is and where you feel you belong. And that is something that is a choice that you eventually had to make one day. And I believe that right now in the present, I am ready to make that choice. Thank you for listening to my story.